Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Film Fracas. Before you listen to the podcast, though, we have some exciting news. We are launching our merch store. That's right. Right now, you can go on the internet, click the link in the show notes, and, buy some Film Fracas merch. We have 3 shirts available for you. One of them says bye-bye, one of them says meticulously, and the other one says #Fracas. All on the back, and the front is our faces. Other than that, we have a mug, a pillow, and a sticker. And all of the proceeds from this go directly into making the show better. So thank you so much for your support. Thank you for listening. Buy merch if you want to, if you can. That's teespring.com/stores/Film Fracas. Thank you guys so much. On with the show.
And now, on with the show.
Hello, everybody. It is time for Film Fracas. So either run away or sit down and get ready to listen. This is Brett the Rock Johnson coming at you. With me, as always, are the one and only Phoenix Party Zamboni Zarola.
That's my name. What's up?
Carter, the whole effing show Spilliards.
Hello, how are you?
And Robbie, the main man DeShazer.
What's up?
This is episode 7, The Fracas Awakens. And we are down to our final 3 films, the Holy Trinity, as it were.
This is it. We're getting closer.
This is
The last 3?
second to last
This is our
episode.
penultimate episode of the season.
Yes, it is.
Our season,
Battle of the Bastards,
Our
if you
season
will.
finale.
I want to go that far. And today we're going to be talking about cinematography, and the films we got left are Who Framed Roger Rabbit, The Silence of the Lambs, and Robocop.
And none of Carter's films.
That's
No.
right. Princess Bride got voted off last week, rendering Carter a broken
Shell of a man.
Broken shell of a man, yes, with not a movie to his name.
Nope.
So everyone say bye to Carter. I'm going to be muting his mic now. And,
Wild card.
He's gone.
Yeah, I'm really
Wild
scared
card.
of him at this
Where'd he
point.
go? Where did Carter go? He's muted. He doesn't exist.
No, he's right there.
Did you
Okay,
actually
he's back.
mute me?
I
Okay.
actually muted you for
Oh, wow.
He's got nothing to
goodness.
lose at this point. He's dangerous.
I am dangerous. I can just drop bombs left and right. All these movies suck.
Quick, give us a hot take.
A hot take?
Hot take.
These movies are pretty good.
That's not a hot
very
take,
cold.
Carter.
That was such a
Golly.
cold take.
Carter. God, we had a bit going and you ruined it.
Well, last week he went real wild card and chose his winner as his loser.
Yes.
Yeah, and I thought that was the start of his chaotic reign. It was,
I'm excited.
But no,
Chaotic
he's real
evil.
subdued.
I'm
Yeah.
excited.
Chaotic neutral something.
yeah.
He is the most true neutral at this point. Like Carter's always in a state of neutral good, and to make him
Pretty true neutral.
That's a nice compliment.
That's all well and good if we were playing alignment fracas, but we're not. We're playing film fracas.
playing Film Fracas. This is it.
He's got you
Who's
there.
starting? What we got?
Do we announce the topic?
Yeah, cinematography. We're talking cinematography.
We definitely pulled that out of a hat.
Yeah.
There's the hat.
There's a hat.
With one slip left in it.
We had 2 categories, and one of them is the finale. So
Do we have any criteria or guidelines that
let's ask
we're
Carter.
defining
I found that this is to
cinematography
be the
as?
most clear cut. Where the camera, the shots. What do you need clarification on?
No, I'm just wanting, like, for the listeners.
I mean, so cinematography is, what we see on the film. It's the lighting, it's the camera movement, it's the way a shot is framed, it's how dynamic is it, how static is it, meaning how much does it move, how much does it stand still. Anyone want to add?
Yeah, lighting's definitely going to come to play because we did, say that we did when talking about production design, reserved that for this week.
Correct.
Yes.
What else?
Lighting's a big deal. Framing that shot.
I would say I feel like that means color is not a take on this because we used color for production design.
I'd say color is
lighting color. But
I would
not
say
like,
color is an element
Well,
of
light
both
versus
of them.
shadow, I get, but like as like blues and greens and yellows and stuff.
I'd say, like, the color of the lighting, but not, like, the color palette
I would
of,
say-
like, of the sets
No,
and
the
costumes
sets, no,
and such.
but I would say like the composition of the image, if that makes sense.
like color correction.
Yeah, or like
yeah. So let's use the film Moonlight, which is gone now, for example. Like, cinematography would involve, like, that shot of him overlooking the ocean, the blues in the sky that are brought
Yeah.
out by the lighting, like, and the color correction, those are a part of cinematography. They weren't necessarily a part of
Okay,
it.
so
Yeah.
some
So,
takes of color
or
are
like
gonna be counted.
how all David Fincher movies are green.
Yeah.
That would be.
Yeah, so like
Well, Gone Girl's blue, but
Well,
yeah,
yeah.
I get what you're saying.
so the color of the lighting, more
Yeah.
or less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For all intents and purposes.
Because that one's not necessarily lighting, but yeah.
But we're not looking at the color of Hannibal Lecter's jumpsuit.
No.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's why I said
Correct.
the color, not of the sets, not of the costumes, not of the production design.
Because we talked about that.
Yes.
Already.
Yeah, a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
All right.
2 weeks ago.
If you want to talk about it in tandem, like how the lighting improves that.
That
Except
could be
we
points in
already
your favor.
did that.
Exactly.
So-
But yes.
Okay, but yeah, let's.
At this point, some things we've already talked about in the movies are going to come up again.
Yeah. We've talked
Okay, yeah.
at length about these films.
So let's get the fracas rolling.
Not that I can.
And who wants
anymore.
who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Ooh, and then we'll go out.
Yeah, and then we'll go out. Then y'all go at the same time.
I'm gonna say no.
Yeah, let's not do
How
that.
about I talk about all three of them and none of you say anything?
Do it.
That's as
Okay,
chaotic
go.
as started.
Go, let's do it. Everybody point your mics at Carter.
Robbie,
Dear
edit,
Lord.
edit that out.
Thanks for the dead air, Carter. Called you on your bluff. Okay,
All right,
Phoenix.
yeah, I'm here to talk about the cinematography in Silence of the Lambs.
I'm just looking at the tape and there's just a silent stop.
Not
Okay.
not about it.
It was a pregnant pause.
But what I am about is the
You're pregnant?
cinematography
What?
in
Stop.
Silence of the Lambs. This movie is just so incredibly shot, so well made. There's so many frames and compositions that are just capture the tone of the film, particularly in the reverse shots between Clarice and Hannibal Lecter. That really kind of shows the power dynamics within their dialogue and the way they frame it and the way they use how like the close-ups and the medium shots I would say are fantastic. I think any of the angles involving Hannibal Lecter in I think it's the second prison, the one that's where he's in the
In the hangar.
hangar, are well done as well. I think if we're going on like lighting and color, I think this balances out really well because it's a very dark film, but the stuff that it shines light on is very menacing and terrifying in itself, giving it that like harsh feeling. That shot of down the well in the shot in Down the Well at Buffalo Bill's
Yes.
hut or whatever is so like simple but still so menacing, and how deep it looks. Like it really just looks like someone had like really far down and just conveys such like a menacing tone or whatever. And then like when you see it at first, you kind of don't know what it is, but it's only at like the next time when you see how dark it is that someone has trapped all the way down there. I just think it does a really good job at conveying the story elements, telling the narrative of the film, while also just adding those little touches of scare and power and relationship and grittiness. Even at the beginning when you just see Clarice talking to her boss at first, when he's talking about Hannibal Lecter, it's just like so close up on him, and you could see how serious and disturbed he is just talking about this man. Or when Clarice first walks into the room with all the other FBI agents, and it's just that shot of all of them turning around to look at her, and just knowing like their faces kind of tell the story of, oh, she's totally not prepared for this. She's not in her element, or at least that's not what they think she is. In just the way it captures these moments, you can kind of feel the stakes and feel the unspoken struggles and the unspoken parts of the story that I think are just so brilliant. And so, yeah, I think the cinematography here is gold.
I think Silence of the Lambs has the worst cinematography of any movie ever made.
Carter, don't do this to me.
I'm not actually going to say that.
Thank you.
It's going to be a long podcast, guys.
Yeah, this is
chaotic
rain.
rain.
No, it's this one. I think out of our three films remaining, I think this one definitely has the most mature cinematography. It's got like the static shots on Hannibal Lecter are very unsettling and create that kind of like unflinching. You just have to take in his face, and the fact that he rarely blinks. It's often lots of people think that he's like not blinking, but he does blink.
They take it out in post.
Yeah, but it's just it's very unnerving, and it's like even in the night vision sequence, how they handle that, because you don't really see that a lot, but that in that movie it's used very effectively.
Yeah, that POV where you just you're on Buffalo Bill like observing Clarice, and the movements are so even though it's like a POV, they're still so very like swayed and slow, but it's because they're coming from a killer who's like trying to methodically like take out this person.
When everything in it you can tell is so very carefully like crafted and planned to go a certain way, so that really speaks to the work put in to designing it.
Yeah, and if I could just talk about another shot, the final scene when you're like watching Hannibal Lecter walk into that crowd as the credits roll, and it's just like panning out, and you just see Hannibal Lecter like mix in with everybody, and all of a sudden you can't see him anymore and stuff. It's just such a unique and crazy.
Very ominous.
It's very ominous, and it kind of ominous, and it kind of.
I was wondering if you'd address it.
Of course,
Why?
It was very ominous, and it just conveys that like, oh shit, he's really gone. Like we don't know where he is anymore. Like it just tells it without even saying anything. It just shows it, and I think it's another fantastic shot in the movie.
Yeah, The Silence of the Lambs is fantastic. It's obviously gotten this far in. It does such a good job. The cinematography is so important to creating the mood for the film, and that as we've talked about it week after week, I think that the mood of the film is so important to what this film is. And I think of the, I talked last week with Score, I talked about, the kind of the hierarchy of needs for what, in order to build, this mood for this film. And I think the two most important are the cinematography and the performances. You could take out the music, you could take out the incredible production design. You could do without so many of these things, but you take out the, just masterfully done cinematography and the incredible performances, and the other elements wouldn't matter.
I agree.
So, I feel like I love this movie. I love the cinematography. Who's the cinematographer on it? Because I was going to give all the credit to Jonathan Demme, but obviously he's working with...
I don't know. I'll
look that up.
Yeah.
But yes, Demme, visionary, whoever did the cinematography. I feel like I should have done my homework.
Yeah, same here.
I'll look up all of the cinematographers. I
have a cinematographer for my film, but I didn't take the time to look up everyone else's.
Yeah.
Cinematography was done by Tak Fujimoto.
Shout out to you, man. You killed it.
Very nice.
But,
yeah, I agree so much that it's such a important part of this movie, and maybe not one that you really consider when you first watch the movie, because I think you come away from the performances themselves and maybe the story a bit, but when you're in the movie, you can definitely feel the greatness of the cinematography. Like you can see it in the motion, the framing and stuff. It's really wonderful. Even the profiles, or not profiles, the straight view of Hannibal Lecter and Clarice also tells so much. It's just like a humanistic kind of weird shot.
And I will say the one thing I have against it is that it may be used too much to set the mood rather than to, sometimes it just, there aren't necessarily moments that I feel like I'm, overtaken with, wow, this shot is so incredibly beautiful, other than, a few standouts, but which you're going to get in every movie. But
right, yeah.
But maybe it contributes too much to the mood, and maybe that takes away from it, but I don't know if it's something I'll consider once we've talked about all the films, I think.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I think it's all really solid. I don't know what all I can say that hasn't already been touched upon. I think I kind of see what Robbie was saying a little bit, but it's great. The only thing for me, and we kind of talked about this when we were talking about production design, was how well in tandem the production design and the cinematography work to really enhance that very did we say like clinical?
Yeah,
Yeah,
clinical,
clinical,
medical, something like
Like
that.
the very like clinical feel of everything. It's kind of like yeah, the only thing is I feel like the cinematography like goes above and beyond and goes up to 11 because of the production design. But that's not a knock against anything. It's kind of like if the production design wasn't up to 11, then the cinematography probably wouldn't have been like as enhanced and complemented. But like by no means is it bad. It's still great. Like Carter said, it's probably definitely like the most mature and very like very like methodical, clinical. I know the word of the podcast is meticulous, and I hate to say it again, but yeah, it's just very clear vision of what they wanted everything to look and feel like. And so yeah, I don't think it's ever like too much or like oversaturated or anything like that. And yeah, it's good. It's very good.
Yeah, and I think to add on to that, I agree that like most movies, the production design and cinematography kind of complement each other or work together to accomplish the same goals.
It's by no mean only like a thing that comes up with Silence of the Lambs. It's
I agree with that completely. That it has that, like most movies do. And I like how we said, like, it's a very, it kind of conveys that sort of clinical and calculating aspect or atmosphere of the movie. It's really well done. Even just, it does so well with just the introduction of Hannibal Lecter, like when it's showing all those other prisoners and how insane they are, and then the reveal pan / POV of Hannibal Lecter just standing there in the middle is
because it goes from the dolly shot to just the static. It's just very much kind of like this guy's insane, but he's not like visibly crazy.
He's terrifying in a different sense, and we have to watch to find out.
He's a different kind of crazy.
Exactly.
I will say, just I guess as a critique, or my only real critique of it is, it's very much, you talk about, there are definitely moments that stand out that are spectacular. But think about the film that aren't those moments, and it's like, it's just pretty regular. And I would even say there are some parts of the movie that the cinematography kind of takes a back seat to the editing, even though they kind of go in tandem with one another. But I think there are moments in there where like the editing shines and the cinematography is kind of like, yeah, it's there. And the same with like there's certain elements where it's more about like the music, or it's more about some other things like that. Which, I mean, no movie can be 100% on one thing, but I do think,
there is very much a kind of ebb and flow between all the different aspects.
And I think that's a valid and good point about that, because one thing I was thinking about was, like you said, sometimes maybe the shots are good, but the editing is what sells it. And we're not talking about editing now. So I do see your point in that, and I can't really argue against it because I agree. Sometimes it, for certain parts of it, you can tell that it's more editing than cinematography that's giving that sort of feel.
Like the misdirect is what comes to mind for me when the FBI is charging in.
The misdirect.
Because that
shot's not remarkable, but the way
it's
it's
the cross-cutting.
It's the way it's edited.
Yeah, it's the cross-cutting that sells it there. But I would still say that as most editors would say, like, you're only as good as the shot is.
Exactly.
So
they work very much together.
Yeah. So,
which is, like I said, everything in this movie works so well together.
Right. And if it's edited well, that means the shots are pretty good too. So.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's all we got to say about Silence of the Lambs.
What else say just about the editing? The shots match so well that it works. Like,
yeah, I agree.
It's meticulously done. I mean, to say meticulous again now, I didn't realize how much we said it. And
the
Brett
silence
pointed
of
it
the
out.
meticulous.
I don't know. We haven't said the word shining in a while.
Shining.
God. Or prism.
Y'all want to talk about The Shining? It's so...
God, no, let's not talk about The Shining. We shot it off the moon.
Oh, yeah, we
did.
Phoenix,
look behind you. Look up in the air. That's The Shining. Just going over the moon.
Yeah, you see that? You see that looks like a comet almost?
Yeah. That thing shining up in the sky.
Big fan. As I wave to it, leaving.
Oh, goodness.
All right, how about we move on?
Let's rope it back in here.
Stanley Kubrick's rolling.
Right, you want to talk about Robocop?
Yeah, I thought you said let's Robocop it back in here.
No, that wouldn't make any sense.
Well, it doesn't have to make sense.
Got to rope it back in. No,
I guess you could say
anyway. Okay, so yeah, let's talk about RoboCop. I'm gonna try to be like, I've been thinking about this, and I'm gonna try to be as objective as possible because in case our listeners haven't figured it out, RoboCop is probably my favorite movie of all time. And so,
What?
And so
I hadn't figured this out.
This is completely new information.
Oh my goodness! Why can't we just talk?
Because we only have 3 movies and we gotta fill time.
Do we though? Anyway,
Yeah, we always
I'm,
go
not, I'm not.
over.
I'm not going to be part of the problem. I'm under no illusions about what kind of movie RoboCop is. It is a sci-fi action movie from '87, made on a budget of $13 million, which was not very much at the time.
Definitely not a lot today for a major motion
Oh
picture.
yeah, of course not. And cinematography in RoboCop is not the best by like modern standards. Like compared to Moonlight, it's like RoboCop looks like it could have been shot on a phone next to something like next to something like RoboCop, next to something like Moonlight,
Like something like
Or-
Of
RoboCop
course, he means
2017.
RoboCop 2014.
Yeah.
I mean,
2014.
like, yeah, even then. But
Wait, is that not the RoboCop we've been talking about this whole time?
no, Carter.
No, Carter.
Stop.
You've been.
This changes everything.
Oh goodness.
This is his chaotic reign. I'm telling you.
But I feel like I'm gonna start with the lighting. Everything is very well lit, which I feel like works on 2 different levels. Because on the one hand, like we're talking about, like this is dystopian, futuristic, crime-ridden Detroit. Everything's falling apart. Everything's going to hell, and everything being so well lit, even at nighttime, really just like helps to show, like, yes, like kind of like shines a spotlight on this. It's kind of like you can't like sweep this problem under the rug. This is all happening right now. Like you can't just ignore it. Here it is, like, and just kind of like confront, like just kind of like continuously like confronts you with like, yes, like there are problems. You can't just turn off the lights and ignore them. But then also on the other hand, there is also that big sense of like hope and like finding like with RoboCop's arc of like finding his humanity. It's kind of like, yes, things are bad, but they can get better. People can overcome. And so everything being very well lit also kind of like shows that kind of like hope that is more or less kind of like constant throughout the whole movie. And so just, yeah, there's no fancy like everything's tinted blue or green or anything like that. Everything's just just brightly well lit, and I think it works. And then there are a number of moments where the lighting definitely just changes to fit whatever theme, or maybe not theme, but the moments that are happening. Like when RoboCop's fighting Ed 209 and Ed 209 blasts him in the face and his visor cracks, and there's just the extreme close-up on his eye, just with kind of like the spotlight shining on it, just to show you like, oh, like there is a face under there. There is a man inside the machine, and just really helps to hammer home like, oh, he is not just a walking hunk of metal with a very robust, well-defined jaw. And then after he falls out of that fight, he ends up at the like parking garage of OCP. Then all the police headlights and everything are shining on him, and everything else is just dark, and it's just to show like, oh, like it is the man versus machine, but it is man versus the machine that is a man versus the machine, just kind of like not juxtaposing, but really just kind of showing a different side of this conflict from a different perspective. And then, so I feel like that's the lighting. And then the lighting in all of the commercials is like a little bit dimmer with that cheesy, like 80s cartoon newscast kind of, not cartoon, but like commercial, just like that lo-fi kind of lighting, kind of like,
Aesthetic,
just to kind of like show how all that's going. And a lot of the camera work in RoboCop is it's very different, and it suits each of the characters and what's going on, and I feel like in very good ways, because like whenever it's showing RoboCop walking around or has things from RoboCop's perspective, it like feels very like fluid and almost like kind of robotic, because you see RoboCop like walking in behind like the frosted glass in the police station, and the camera just like so smoothly turns to follow him, and just like constantly kind of does that whenever things are from his perspective.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to jump in, but
no, it's okay.
I actually wanted to talk about that because I think for for RoboCop and the its use of POV when you're looking through RoboCop's like vision, I think it's one of the, I would even, you know, right now say one of the strongest like uses of POV in like movies or whatever, because one thing that it really shows is like you said, that feeling of like machine controlling this man, like not to get like, you know, too deep about it, but like a camera is a machine, and so like by definition,
You don't
going
say.
well, it's jokey, but I mean for real, like a camera is a machine. So when you kind of put that POV and kind of give that POV feel of like a camera movement, like going around and stuff, it by nature is making it feel more robotic.
Yeah.
And when you put it on a POV of a person, it kind of gives that already kind of robotic feeling of watching something, and you're kind of taking into what it really does feel like to be RoboCop at this point. And I think that's, you know, not an understatement. It would be weird to imagine RoboCop without a POV use or whatever, and that's like a clear choice that they use, and I think they used it well because even just in by nature it already works, and then how they sell it with the actual like effects and like the what he's like using and the lighting and stuff kind of like shows the machineness of it. But I think just using that pan is great.
It's one of the few movies that has a lot of POV in it that I don't get tired of it really quickly. I will say. Like, Carter's about to have a hot take.
I'm not gonna bullshit you, Brett. I'm gonna speak frankly because I can now.
You could speak frankly.
There was nothing
beforehand.
stopping you from speaking frankly this entire show.
I know.
This is a podcast that firmly believes in the First Amendment.
So, RoboCop's fighting a bit of an uphill battle here.
Yeah.
Like
I said, I'm under no illusions about what this movie is.
I think that where this film excels, and you were speaking to it quite a bit, was the lighting. I have a comment about the POV. The lighting, I think, is even like, because the music, we were talking about that, how it fit thematically with the movie. The lighting, even to an extent, fits thematically, because when you have Murphy like pre RoboCop, he's portrayed in a lot of like more natural light. And then post RoboCop, he's in a lot more heavy fluorescent light, which is kind of adds to that more like machine industrial feel.
And when he has very human moments, he's back in.
He's back in natural light.
Like when he's walking through the house, having the memories of his family.
Yes.
When he's out in like the quarry, kind of, I don't know what else to call it.
Back at the steel mill at the end of the movie.
Where the POV comes in, this was 1987. Terminator was 1982, I believe.
I'll Google that.
It also utilized POV. I do think this kind of borrows from that. 84. I do think this kind of borrows from that a little bit. I don't think it's like ripping it off, but I do think...
to a degree, it does rip it off a bit because it is a satire of other films like it. So
I'll say it does it better.
But I was going to say, I don't necessarily know that it does it better. I was just saying it's not like a wholly original thing to RoboCop to use this like robotic point of view.
I didn't think Phoenix was saying it was
not at all. POV was invented like way decades before.
No, but like
POV's been around since people.
Like the robot POV kind of thing interface.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, but I meant more in the sense of one thing that I think RoboCop, the underlying thing that shows is not just that it's a robot, but it's a human taking over by a robot.
Yes.
And he was talking more of like the theme and like the feel of it, not so much the interface.
Well, also I think it's done in a different way because most of the POV in Terminator is very red tinted. Correct?
That's true. And it's green in RoboCop.
It's a little bit green. It's just got kind of a
like the heads up display and the text is all green, but when you're seeing through his eyes, everything is
it's just dark.
Everything is just regular colored.
Oh, okay.
It's just got lens.
It's
got probably a polarized lens on it.
Yeah. Well, that's what I have to say about that. I just I didn't want I couldn't tell if it because it was coming off to me a little bit like you were talking about like this is like using it the best since it's been ever, like kind of almost talking like it made it like that. And I was like, well, I mean, Terminator kind of did it first, and we can argue who did it better, but that's not really what this is about.
Right.
But yeah, that's what I think about that.
Then to kind of continue, a lot of I like thought about it, and like a lot of the shots in RoboCop are also like very like symmetrical, and
They
like
are.
a lot of them are like very well balanced. The first one that comes to mind is when Alex Murphy's getting blown away. Like he's there kind of doing like the crucifix pose, and it's just kind of like it's just him just down the middle, just getting blown apart on each side. And then when he shows all the bad guys, they're very just like evenly spread out across the screen. And then there's a lot of just like balance between shots when they're doing the chase, just between the two cars. And then in the back of the van, when one of Clarence's goons has been shot and he's lying there on the ground, and then Clarence is there like just above him, like you have one in the like bottom left of the screen, the other one just above him in the top right, and it's just like, I don't want to say like yin yang, but like just very well balanced and like kind of symmetrical in its way, and just really like enhancing like the power dynamic. And then the same thing happens when Clarence has Alex Murphy just at his mercy. You have the high angle shot of Murphy there on the ground saying like, buddy, I think you're slime. Then you have the low angle shot of Boddicker standing over him. It's just like think about it, I never realized how just like well balanced everything is, and it's just kind of like for every shot there was an equal and opposite shot. And then just like, yeah, just a lot of the shots are very symmetrical. RoboCop making his first like big appearance out in the world, stopping the convenience store robbery. He just throws open the door and you get that big just like whooshing like electronic sound effect, and it's just like, oh, like RoboCop is here. He has entered the premises. And then I just think it's very, very impressive just how well balanced everything is, again, for just like something that can just be kind of like just kind of like tossed aside as like, oh, it's a movie about a robot cop from the 80s. That's...
Do you know how like tall Peter Weller is?
I do not.
Do you know if
Tall
he's
enough.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to think because
Taller than me.
When you see RoboCop in different shots, he's portrayed with this kind of like heft and
He's wide.
size. Yes, and I didn't know if Peter Weller was already a very tall man, because it may or may not.
I know he's pretty tall.
Because if the cinematography portrays him in a certain way to accentuate like the size of RoboCop, even if in actuality he is not that big, that would be a plus. But I don't know how big Peter Weller actually is.
I know he's a very lanky person.
Yeah.
He is. I guess you could say he's pretty tall, but he's. But yeah, the
Are you looking
the
at
cinematography definitely
how tall Peter Weller is?
accentuates like the size and everything, like you were saying. Fun fact: Peter Weller was the only person that could fit in the suit, and that's why he was the guy to play RoboCop.
Wow.
He's 6 foot.
6 foot.
He was the Cinderella for that movie.
He's about average height.
he was.
He's Goldilocks.
Yeah.
So
average height.
he's like an inch taller than me.
So
Or I
it's, yeah, I would definitely
he was
I give that to the
Cinderella.
cinematography then, because
Yeah.
he
Director
definitely
was Goldilocks.
feels larger
Like, yeah.
in
Needs
a
someone who's
lot of the
just right.
shots.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so
What's confusing?
yeah, I just feel like
Two concurrent
I just feel like everything kind of comes together to just kind of like make a good film. Like, is it like, no, it's not as like complex or as mature, say, as like Silence of the Lambs, but I feel like
It has its own merits.
like it has its own merits. Like, it's like
You have to take it within the context of
like
the film.
exactly, that's what I'm trying to like, that's what I'm
'Cause
saying,
the
like
cinematographer of RoboCop was not going for prestige Oscar drama.
right, and it's just kind of like its simplicity.
Yeah.
I feel like just kind of like works to its advantage. Like, it's not unnecessarily or overly complex. It works for what it is. And just like when you think about it, just how well balanced and symmetrical, and how just like the camera movements are never just kind of like rapid, erratic. They're all very like composed and calm, and just work for the story that's being told and everything that's going on. And just I feel like it's pretty good. But again, it is also a product of its time. I recognize it is a cheesy movie from the late 80s, and so trying to be as objective as possible with this.
I mean, one thing that we should also bring up is, and I feel like we'll bring it up in Roger Rabbit as well, but it also uses its cinematography to tell jokes and to be funny. Like this, like when what is it, like when he's like aiming at, like tracking all the body parts and stuff, and then it starts following like where the bullets are going, is so funny. And then I forget like the actual shot, but there's like that the shot of when he's like at the building, like is he like falling or something? You know what I'm talking about? Like when the what's the mech called?
The Ed 209.
Yeah, when the Ed 209 like is in the room with her and starts like firing and stuff.
Right.
Yeah. It's just, you know, it's a one thing that I think is to add to your point about it doing what it does well is like I think there's times when it plays on the camp in like a really funny way. Like it could very well be like just a movie that's just shot and like the jokes kind of fall, but I think there's a lot of times when the shots kind of make the joke funnier, and I think that's like a positive.
Yeah, I actually hadn't really thought about that very much, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I don't have too much to add on or take away or say, disagree with.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think it does well for what it is. I mean, sometimes it's a little flat. I think of the films that we have today, it definitely, just looking at it, shows the most age. And these are all these are all films from roughly the same span of 5 years, 87, 88, and 91. Like,
yeah, and I think
and of the films, I think it does show some of the most age. But
it definitely does show its age the most.
Yeah, I think we all kind of echo the same criticisms for it. I think it, like you said, it's got merits. It's good. It's good when it's good. So we'll just see how it goes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right.
Let's wait, real quick, Carter. Who's the DP before we forget? Because you're gonna look up for all the movies.
I had it, and then I forgot it.
He even prepped at the beginning. I was gonna look up.
I looked it up and I lost the name.
Oh, man,
I am sorry. Credit goes to, I believe it was a Frenchman because.
Okay.
Luc Besson, not
Luc
Paul,
Besson.
not Luc Besson.
It was
Paul
Jost Vacana?
Jost Vacana, yeah, something.
And Son.
Where's Paul Verhoeven from?
Paul Verhoeven's from
the Netherlands?
He's Dutch, so yeah, he's from the Netherlands.
I imagine he's a Dutch cinematographer then.
Jost Vacana, also known for Das Boot, Starship Troopers.
He's German.
Total Recall. So
German.
That's right. He worked on Starship Troopers and Total Recall.
Yes.
Well, shout out to you, man.
Well, yeah, the guy
and
who's
one episode
not
of
Luc
Tales
Besson.
of the Crypt.
I don't know why that was. Cool. I was looking at it. There was a Valerian ad.
Oh.
I was like,
God, could you imagine if it was Luc Besson? It's like, wait, hang on.
I thought he was just throwing out names, just hoping they would
name a person.
Just like
person.
some French thing like Pepe Le Pew and then
Marvin the Martian.
Let's talk about some of those cartoon characters.
Yeah, perfect segue. Let's go.
Ooh, I saw that and took a hold of it and just kept it going. Let's talk
I just said it was a good transition. Stop talking about it and do it.
I think that was such a great transition that Robbie just made.
Wow, this devolved into the worst.
We want to talk about this for a little bit.
Can't take you guys anywhere.
That there couldn't have been a better transition.
No.
Oh God.
Robbie, just start talking.
Yep. Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
It was Judge Doom.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'll stop you before we need to, Carter. The cinematography was done by Dean Cundy.
Won an Oscar for it, right?
He was nominated for an Oscar for it. For this film.
I think he won.
Mississippi Burning won that year.
Dean Koontz.
But also known for his cinematography work in Jurassic Park, Apollo 13, Escape from New York. He did a lot of collaborations with John Carpenter, including Brett's favorite, Halloween 3: Season of the Witch.
That was not a John Carpenter film.
But he did.
That was the one and only Tom Wallace.
You're right. He did.
He did it. But, fun fact: Dan Hurley is in Halloween 3: Season of the Witch, and he's also the head of OCP in RoboCop. So come full circle.
But Dean Cundy did the first 3 or 4 Halloween films. Was the cinematographer or director of photography, depending on what he was credited as each time. Also did Back to the Future. Collaborated with Robert Zemeckis a lot.
Jurassic Park.
Yes,
we said that.
Okay.
You want to talk about meticulous. It's the word of the podcast, as Brett said. This film went through before it got to the final stage, it went through 2 shoots and then a animation phase. So they had to go through and they shot every scene originally with stand-in actors and props and stuff in order so that the actors could get their eye lines right, and so they could be acting with animated characters. They then shot it again without those things there, and then and then that film was sent to the animators to then use the original as a reference and then to draw in the characters on the second shoot. So we're not only going to talk about the cinematography of the real life cameras, but we're also going to talk a little bit about animation, because this is probably the best place to talk about it, I think.
I would immediately say that we shouldn't consider it, but we can talk about it, because I feel like that's an entirely different thing.
Yeah. It's more in like...
Well, I think
I think like how the camera follows the animated characters, but the animation itself would be...
This would be synonymous to talking about
animation.
This would be synonymous to talking about if we're talking about with Robocop, we're considering like the actual tracking effects and stuff, like, or the UI that we were glossing over, because that's just all like effects in post.
Yeah, and we talked about effects with production design.
I guess we did. I'll mention what I was thinking about, and you guys can tell me whether or not it's... Let me get there.
Okay.
So
That's what we're here for.
Yep. The cinematography in this is so well done. It
was nominated for an Oscar.
And nominated for an Oscar for it. Let's just get it out of the way. Let's talk about bumping the lamp. Like, that is... We talked about it a little bit in production design. That scene, for those of you who don't know, it's in the back area of the bar, I believe.
Yeah.
And Eddie's trying to remove the handcuffs that have him and Roger stuck together. And they keep walking back and forth because Roger's moving all over the room.
Crazy.
He's going crazy. The camera is following them the entire time, and Eddie Valiant keeps bumping his head on this lamp, causing it to swing wildly back and forth throughout the room. And what happens is the light is so perfectly done that the same way that the light is hitting Eddie Valiant and the other characters in the room, it's also refracting and going on. And the shadow and the lights are changing on Roger. It became kind of it became a term for going above and beyond when doing lighting in these scenes, and especially for doing films like this where animation and live action are mixed. It's such a good example of how meticulous this film is made. But let me talk about a little bit about the animation, because the camera work was done so that these actors could work with animated characters. So everything's making sure that everything's done right, so that Roger stands about 3 feet tall, and so there are scenes where you want to make sure that in frame you have Roger, you have Eddie making his eye line at Roger, and then Roger is placed in the right spot. And this is what I was talking about the animation and the animators, is that there are times where things are just slightly off, and the animators had to go in and they would stretch Roger out. They would put him on his tiptoes. Like, they would have to work with they would have to work with the cinematography to create that final shot that you see, and to create something that works within what they already had, because it was shot a full 2 years before animators got even a chance to touch it. I keep saying meticulous because I'm stuck on it now because Brett brought it up, but it's
detailed.
It's so detailed. The lighting is so perfect. It moves seamlessly from lighthearted family scenes, to dark noir alleys, and a good use of shadows. We talk about the patty cake scene a lot because it's funny, but the way that the camera just moves throughout those scenes and accentuates humor, and make sure that you're focused on where the joke is more so, rather than maybe where whoever's talking is. You definitely see what Roger's up to and his craziness more so than maybe in a scene where Eddie's talking about noir stuff. Like the focus, it definitely follows Roger, it follows the joke, and I think it does such an incredible job. Let's talk about it.
I would say that yes, this movie is at its best when you're talking about the lighting, with bumping the lamp, with the dark alleys, with the way that Judge Doom is even lit. Whenever he's in the scene, the way Jessica Rabbit is lit when she sings. When
she frickin' sits in Eddie Valiant's lap and touches his face, takes off his hat, it's so
Yeah.
the tracking on that is so like it tracks
is.
her. The lighting is perfect so that it doesn't look like because that's an issue you run
Yeah.
into with live action animation hybrids.
Yeah.
Is a lot of people missing their marks or just not caring in the
Clipping,
light.
like hands going into.
Hands clipping. We'll talk about another example from Disney. Mary Poppins. It looks like Mary Poppins is just there on this flat background, which is this animation, and it doesn't hit, and it feels a little bit off, like she's looking into dead space, but it's done so well in this film that everything feels like the animated characters, the real people, that they all exist in the same dimensions. Other thing I'll talk about, I guess, that I forgot to mention was that, like, unlike other live action animation hybrids, which have a lot of static cameras because you want to make it easier for the animators, this has camera movement to it that makes it feel like a real movie. It doesn't,
The movie's very dynamic. They move.
it is super dynamic.
That is a fact.
I think that yes, it's very much kind of the gold standard that like most other hybrid animation live action movies strive to get to that point.
It's why they got the same cinematographer for the Looney Tunes back in action.
Yeah. Also, actually does it quite effectively.
Another pretty good example of it.
Yeah.
Not as great of a movie in the same respects, but
I don't know.
We have not talked
no.
about Space Jam enough in this podcast.
Space Jam also.
he didn't do Space Jam, though.
No, but it's still, that's another movie where, I don't know why, but it seems like the 2D with the live action works better than the 3D with the live action. But
I think it's also just one of those things that it's
That's a whole different conversation.
hand painting onto film
That's true.
is so... now you can do it with computers, and it's something that wouldn't have worked as well today because...
true. Yeah.
We should spend a whole season talking about Space Jam.
Either way,
Season 2,
Space Jam.
Space Fracas.
Either way, this movie, yes, the cinematography on this movie is spectacular. Again, this kind of, I go back to with when I was talking about Silence of the Lambs, where it can't always be on. This one, I think, actually suffers less of that problem because this movie always kind of has something going on. Whether it's one of the animated characters, even in the background doing something or there's always something in the frame that is drawing, attention. There's no oh, well, this is happening. Let's just,
Yeah, I think about the tracking shot where it follows Eddie as he walks through the studio, and you just see all the animated characters that are walking past. They're going every which direction.
Well, and when you talk about cinematography and animation, animated movies and stuff, it's kind of a different beast. But they kind of meld that really well with, live action cinematography. And the fact that they marry it so well really speaks to how carefully planned and
These characters are three-dimensional in the shots, and that's...
meticulously
they're...
planned.
Use a different word.
But I was watching, preparing for this, I was reading up everything I could on the cinematography of Roger Rabbit, watching my favorite scenes again.
You're telling me you didn't know all of this off the top of your head?
I didn't just come up with
Way to be a fan of the movie, Rob.
I am a huge fan of this movie, as it's... Coming into this podcast, I didn't realize how much I just adore this movie. I was like, okay, it's a great movie, it'll maybe go far. I love this movie. It's the same with, Brett this whole time. It's just reaffirming my love for this movie.
I hate this movie. I hate all movies.
Carter's never liked a movie ever.
I've never seen a movie, actually. This is all a sham.
I don't know what a movie is.
What's a
He's a film fracas faker.
As far as I know, pictures stand still, thank you very much.
Why is it called
What's
a
all this
movie?
motion? No, thank you. I won't have it.
Yeah, you've just seen the Blu-ray covers of your movies and haven't
Exactly.
actually
Read the
He
back of the
spends
box.
all the money for physical
That
copies,
was it?
but he doesn't have a Blu-ray player.
I
Okay,
stared at
I'm
a
gonna-
DVD for hours and nothing happened. I don't know what you people.
and that was the
I just
greatest
saw
movie
my
you've
own-
ever seen.
I just saw my own face
that
staring
was
back at me.
that movie was Citizen Kane. It's his favorite movie.
Yeah, I'm gonna just echo Carter real quick and kind of kind of a little similar to what Carter said, where it's kind of it's not always on. It is good throughout the whole movie, but there are some moments that stand out a lot more than others. Like the bumping the lamp sequence. That's phenomenal. It's revolutionary. It's yeah, exactly. It's innovative, but it's kind of yes, that's fantastic and that's a great part, but it's I'm trying to figure out how to word this correctly.
There's some great parts, but the rest of it's a lot of, I will admit it, the rest of it's a lot of visual gags and stuff.
Well, like, there is
It's
a lot
not-
of that. And just like Carter said with Silence of the Lambs, like there are a lot of great moments, but a lot of it is a lot of give and take between everything else. And I feel like Roger Rabbit also does have some of that. But as we said, like every movie has ebb and flow and give and take. And so it's just, yeah, like it doesn't necessarily suffer for it, but that is definitely just maybe like a tick just against it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I of course also think the cinematography in this movie is really good. It, like we've said before, earlier, it is an achievement in how it frames things just so things
How
are
it
supposed
frames
to
Roger Rabbit.
be exactly.
I swear.
Who framed Roger Rabbit?
to
It was
God.
Dean.
It was D. Koontz.
Okay.
Dean
Yes,
Koontz.
it was Dean Koontz.
It was executive producer Dick Wolf.
Oh. He framed Roger Rabbit.
Yeah, I just think like that
You
alone.
guys are killing me.
I'm bringing it back. I'm bringing it back.
Should we have been talking
How
about
it-
aspect ratio?
No,
It's too late for that.
Yeah.
I guess it is. I mean, we can always go
We're,
back.
we're into
none of these really
None of these
shit.
are, yeah, I was gonna say none of these.
You don't have
really
a Grand
play with
Budapest
that.
situation here or anything.
Yeah.
Where,
Or like,
That's true.
Dark
Thank
Knight
God.
Rises,
I just
where
had
it's
the thought.
constantly
I thought I'd bring it up.
coming in and out. Like, nah, I think we're fine.
I think they all kind of make
all
sense.
these
think we're
movies
good.
choose their aspect ratio and stick with them.
But we would talk about that in cinematography, right?
You could.
Yeah,
we could, but
we could.
I think we just decided we're not going
I
to just
think-
now, though.
The aspect ratio in all of these films is fine.
Yeah, that's what we
All right,
just
covered
said,
it.
Carter.
Cool.
It's all
Great,
covered.
wasting
we know
time.
We know
Anyways,
what Carter's voting based
I'm
on.
in the middle of a point, and then we went to aspect ratio like it mattered. Okay.
Okay, make your point.
Yeah. So I think it's great.
I just want to
think,
talk about aspect ratio real quick. See, it's not fun, is it?
No, it's not.
Sorry.
It's called nitpicking, Brett. Please don't interrupt
I think
Phoenix.
the way it frames all of its shots while knowing stuff's going to be added in post is excellent and a true achievement to its filmmaking. I think that's where it excels the highest, maybe even more than the lighting, because it's really difficult to get that across. I would say it's just like a matter of just really intricate and probably some very detailed storyboarding beforehand, which I think is, something that we should consider, because that's a big part of cinematography before it gets shot.
It's a big part of animated films, which is
Yes.
50% animated
Yes. And now
in theory.
I have
Yeah.
two kind of things about it. The first being, I know we've been talking about the bumming the lamp scene and just bumming the lamp as a concept and stuff. I feel like for me, with bumping the lamp and the bumping the lamp scene, I think the achievement is in the animation, and I don't think that should be considered for right now, because the achievement in the bumping the lamp scene is how Roger Rabbit is animated while the light is passing his character, and so it's like
that's right.
it's like frame by frame they have to change Roger Rabbit's like color and draw him by hand again, just with every single frame of light that moves, and that's why it's so meticulous and
I
detailed.
would say this is kind of a gray area
Because he actually just hits a lamp. That's not, that's the board.
But I mean,
This was a decision made afterwards, too. This was something that was given, that Robert Zemeckis decided was a challenge that they needed to do. It wasn't like, this was not written into the script. This was decided that he liked the way it looked, and that, in the end, they could have done something where they could have conceivably left Roger.
Right, but that's not cinematography.
what I will say is
the
that
choice to do it even in the room.
That's not cinematography either. That's hitting a lamp.
what I will say is that
But shifting the lighting is what
Carter
I'm
is
saying.
trying to
I'm
talk.
trying to talk. The light. So, I'll say that this is kind of a gray area where you're touching it, because the nature of the shot is how the light affects him, which is the cinematography, and it's just the means that they go about doing that is how they manipulate the animation. So it's kind of both. I would say it should be considered, because it is how the shot is framed and how the shot is done, and it's the lighting in the particular shot, because it's designed to go that specific way. Just the way to accommodate that effect was they had to animate it differently.
Yeah, which is what I've been
Right.
talking about.
Which any animated movie, because like the nature of animated movies cinematography is different than that of live action, they have to accommodate it in that way. So I think it is how it's animated, but I think it's also cinematography.
I disagree. I mean, if you take out Roger Rabbit and put a person there, it's someone hitting a lamp.
I know, but
And that's
it's
someone
not
hitting a
a
lamp.
person.
The achievement is the animation. It's
you
not
should-
the
okay,
cinematography.
but you don't get
or even the lighting, because it's how the animation acts with the light. That's the achievement, and that's why I'm saying for that alone, for that and the other parts of animation, I think is not what I'm looking at, because that's not what cinematography is.
I would just say it's integral to the composition of the shot, and thus it is cinematography. If you don't want to,
it would be a lesser shot if it didn't.
yeah.
happen.
If
it would be a regular shot if it didn't.
But that's fine. What you get is you have the final product. You don't get to judge it based on what it could have been, or what it is if you take out something
I'm
different.
just stating that we're talking about bumping the lamp, the term, and the scene, and I'm saying that it's not as strong for this topic. Bumping the lamp is super such an achievement and very wonderful, and like that scene is incredible. But as far as like how impressive it is when you're looking at the cinematography, it's pretty regular. It's the animation that sells it.
I see where you're coming from, definitely, and it is valid, because it is definitely an emphasis on the animation. And you're right. If it was another person, it would. But because it is animated and it's how the light affects him, that is still part of the shot. You don't have to consider it in your judging, but I would say it's not stricken overall from consideration between us all.
Right. I'm speaking from my point of view.
Yeah, that's entirely up to you.
Well, what you end up with, like I said, is that 50%. I mean, in theory, about 50% of this movie is animation, and to say that what they do with the cinematography of animated characters, of animated sets, is not valid because it's drawn later, or because I think it's still so important to the film. I think that's still so integral to that shot.
No, my first point was like, I think the best part about this movie is how they frame things, knowing that animation's going to be put in post. Like that's really difficult to do, because it's easy to just frame something in the moment because you have the people there. But if you're doing it in post, I think that's like really impressive, and a lot of storyboarding and a lot of precise angles and stuff.
Fair enough.
I'm just speaking in terms of that scene in particular. That
because you're saying the merit comes from like the advanced animation, that like the fact that they were able to animate him to be affected by the light is where the merit comes in, not the fact that the light hits him in the shot.
Right, because if it was a person, it would just be a light hitting him.
Exactly.
But it's great because it's an animated character that's reacting every frame by frame.
That's where the merit comes from.
And I still think that's a great shot, even if you had another person in there. Because what you have is this cramped room. You're tracking back and forth. The light is shifting all over the place. Your focus is going all over. Should be with going where the light's going, but the camera is trained on exactly what you're supposed to be looking at. It's done very, very well. I think it is still a fantastic shot, even if the animation, I feel like they could have phoned it in and just had Roger exist and not worry about it, but they went above and beyond, the shot I think still would have worked had you not done what they did. They not done what they did.
Right, and when I say I'll move on in a second, but when I say that I'm not considering the animation in this movie, I'm not saying I'm not considering 50% of the movie. I'm just saying that when things are framed, I'm looking more at when things are framed and how the camera moves and the light in that scene than I am like, so like for instance, I think like one great shot in this movie is when Roger, for one thing, I think the whole sequence with Jessica Rabbit and her introduction is really well done, or whatever. The tracking of her as she's walking down the runway, I guess, and singing is really well done. The framing of what's his name? Valiant. Valiant as he's looking up and as she's looking down at him, it's really, really great and stuff. I think all that's really good. My other, I would say, small kind of criticism, and this is something I can be swayed on for sure, is one thing that I really like about Silence of the Lambs and Robocop is, I think, in the cinematography. And this gets into more like, my film major mind and stuff. In those movies, I feel like cinematography kind of goes at a deeper element. It's like kind of mise en scène where you see it and you can get a piece of the narrative without even any words at all. And I think with Silence of the Lambs, it's a lot of like terror and like power dynamics and just the creepiness of being watched and someone looking dead at you and stuff. And with Robocop, I think Brett touched on it too, where it's like the themes and the kind of things you get from it are the mechanical like machine vibes and the fight between man versus machine, the transformation element of the whole thing, the campiness and the sort of I would say like darkness of all the scenes with Boddicker. But I would say for Who Framed Roger Rabbit, for the most part, I would say it is. I wouldn't say there's like any sort of themes that it kind of touches on, like that's not just service level or like just following the plot as it goes, which I guess makes sense because they're more focused on getting the animation in post and providing these room for these gags and stuff. But I think still something I'm considering is when I see shots in the movie, I don't necessarily say like, oh, that's a great shot, and they're saying something without even saying something.
But it's also still a family movie. Like, it's not going for something incredibly deep. But I still think that the mise en scène is very, the shots are still very well composed. There's a lot going on in them. Everything is very carefully chosen, like we talked about in the production design episode.
Well, can any of y'all like say like a scene where you're like?
Well, what I wanted to say, speak to that. Last thing about Bumping the Lime, because I just had a thought. Real quick, promise. I agree with Phoenix that if it was just another person, the shot itself is fine. There's nothing spectacular about it. But what I will say is that where the lighting and animation meet in that is kind of. It's the achievement of the marriage of animation and live action, and how the cinematography affects that and is translated in that hybrid and marriage between the two formats, I guess.
Yeah.
Media, whatever. Medium. So that's basically how that fits for me. Talking about what you were talking about, I think because there are a lot of like visual gags that are done with the camera motion and movement, and I'm trying to remember, do they hit the camera at any point?
I don't think they quite. I don't think they.
I don't think so.
No, because it still works like a standard film. Like there's no real breaking.
They don't really break the fourth wall.
There's no real meta.
Like the most meta they get is
content.
that the maroon cartoon at the beginning is a set. Like
I just couldn't remember if they hit the camera at any point.
I don't
think so.
recall.
I just watched
breaking a wall beyond the wall they already broke.
But there are still visual gags that are done through camera movement, and I think that kind of establishes its comedic tone and like reinforces that. So it does it not quite to the intensity as like say Silence of the Lambs, but I'll say it's still there.
Yeah, the cinematography conveys the comedy. It's based in, this whole movie is just seeped in cartoon tonage. Tonage? Is that? It's seeped in like just the tone and the feel of cartoons, and even in the scenes that are more strict noir, it's got, it still has its cartooniness to it, and I think that it does convey a comedic tone, a, surrealist tone of cartoons throughout the entire thing. And it's very face value because cartoons are very face value, but it just doesn't have as, it's not a drama like Silence of the Lambs or even like Robocop is. Like it doesn't have super deep meanings to convey in every shot. Like,
yeah,
it's pretty face value, but I don't know if that's a bad thing if it's, not
yeah, I'm considering it like how, like when we talked about production design in Moonlight, it's like, well, the movie doesn't need to be, so grandiose when it's just the way it is. I'm thinking about that for this. Like, even though it doesn't need to be anything more than face value, I can't not consider that because it still could be.
Okay, yeah, I get what you're saying, Phoenix. Like, that makes sense.
Okay. I kind of Phoenix is kind of swaying me a little bit here because like thinking about bumping the lamp, like I never really stopped to think that kind of like what is really phenomenal about that is the animation itself, and I kind of like I do have to kind of say that a lot of what you're saying, like while it is valid, a lot of what you're saying is kind of like about like the achievement in animation itself. Which, while that is very impressive, talking about cinematography in a live-action animation hybrid is also, like Carter said, like a very gray area, kind of like very fine line. And it's hard to tell, like, what's the animation, what is the cinematography. Whereas, like, compared to, like, a fully animated movie, like Ratatouille, that does play around so much with the lighting, how the camera is set up with the shadows and the interactions of everything. It is very clear that that is the cinematography, but that's also wholly animated. And then also compared to like scenes that are fully CGI, like in Pacific Rim, while that is like overall a dumb, cool movie, like the scenes with like the Jaegers and Kaiju destroying like Tokyo or wherever they are in Japan, just seeing how all the light interacts and how everything is played out and how the camera works, that is very clear cinematography, but it is also wholly CGI, not like a blending of the two, more or less. And so it's just kind of like Phoenix is saying, it is kind of like it is very hard to tell where like when is it considered cinematography and no longer animation, because you are kind of talking, I feel like, that they are one and the same when they are kind of, as Carter said, two very different beasts. So it's just kind of like I think I'm kind of siding with Phoenix on this, in that like while a lot of it is great, and like don't get me wrong, like the cinematography in the movie overall holistically, if I can use Carter's word, it is very like it is very good. It's good. Like we've said, it was nominated for an Oscar. Like clearly that happened for a reason. But it's just
to point out, it's the only one of our movies today nominated for the Oscar.
That is a
for
fact.
cinematography.
For cinematography.
But it is just kind of, I do feel like you are talking a lot more about the animation than, say, cinematography on its own. And I was also kind of thinking the same thing as Phoenix said, kind of like when we were comparing production design, kind of like, oh, well, like Moonlight was based on a play, so it doesn't necessarily need to be like that. But it's like, okay, but compared to everything else.
Yeah, I get.
And so,
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, I would just say like some things like this, it's a very gray area, and it's, I think, could be talked about in both. It doesn't have to be mutually exclusive, one subject or the other. You can talk about it in cinematography, and if we were to discuss animation, we could talk about it in animation as well.
Like it's not necessarily a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
Right.
Here's what I'll pose, and this might change things. So like this is a cinematography topic. That's what we're discussing. If let's say, the movies are different, and we're talking animation, are we talking camera movements? Because that'd be necessarily the same thing.
I think you still would. I think that.
I don't know if I would. I would talk about the drawing and the characters and stuff.
Well, are we talking about animation or cinematography?
Well, like in a hypothetical topic where we have animated movies, and the thing is best animation.
Sorry, no, best animation. You wouldn't talk about that, but I would say that
because
if you're talking about best
cinematography
with a group of wholly animated movies, I think you still talk about camera setup. I think you still like.
I don't know if I would. I mean, it could be like a
discussion of let's say that all three of our movies were animated, and we were still talking cinematography. Yeah, you definitely talk about the same thing as you.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's like a square rectangle type deal, but I would say like if the things were changed, I don't know if I would be like, yeah, the animation of Who Framed Roger Rabbit is good because how they pan the camera and stuff.
That's not. I want you to understand what I'm saying. If we were talking about all animated movies and we were talking about cinematography still.
No, I'm talking about I'm saying
if we're switching it to a different
you're saying that because it's cinematography we can talk about the animation. I'm saying if the topic was animation, would you be talking about cinematography?
Okay, but just because you can go one way doesn't mean that it doesn't like.
So you're saying it's like a square rectangle thing where like a square is not a rectangle, but a rectangle is a square.
I would say it just depends on the instance. You could talk about animation and how it affects the cinematography, like what we're talking about here in Roger Rabbit. But you could also talk about the animation from different aspects.
Yeah.
And vice versa. If the cinematography is,
My discussion on animation wouldn't include the way the camera moves, but my discussion on cinematography, I think because so much of the scene And so much of the movie, so much of the shots are composed of animated pieces that I think you have to discuss it a little bit. I think it.
I mean, I think maybe this is just person to person. I'm saying that I don't see it. Like,
So,
we could say
are-
50% of the movie is animation, but 100% of the movie is some framing. So that's kind of what I'm judging on. I'm judging on 100% of like the camera and the framing of the shots.
I think this is very person to person. It is very situational, and it's just a lot of it is very movie dependent, because I know a lot of like classic Disney movies like Snow White, Pinocchio that were made on that like multi-layered camera. Like if you're talking about animation in that instance, like you would have to talk about camera movement, because the animation was like the camera movement and the animation were very much in tandem, very much hand in hand, and so you would not be able to talk about just it is very situational. And so
That's a good point.
Like,
That was-
it's a very kind of like muddled up
Yeah, and
like
that was-
hypothetical situation to make. I understand what Phoenix is saying, but it is also just it's just not as clear cut as you're trying to make it sound. Although I do appreciate what you're trying to do, and just I just feel like since this is such like a very unique movie, where is it animation, when is it cinematography? I feel like that is kind of working against it. Well, in our discussion right now.
Well, and this was kind of my main point at the very beginning of this discussion about this, was that when you're talking about the cinematography of an animated movie, it's kind of a very different beast than the cinematography of a live action movie, because you have to factor in animation. And where I was getting at was that in the marriage between the two, this is kind of the perfect instance of that. So yes, it is a very case-by-case basis, and when you get into cinematography in animated movies, it is a much more muddied kind of subject. I don't necessarily know that we would talk about them separate from one another, because they are so integral to each other. So
Yeah. What I will say, and I think this is the last point I'll make about it, and I think we'll
then
move
we can
on.
talk about our winners.
What I'll say is, I think that this movie could have done it so much worse, because there are so many examples of it being done so much worse. And I think because this is such a perfect blend of the two, that whether or not you think it, bumping the lamp, like that should even be considered for cinematography. I think that the fact that the cinematographers, that the entire team created a movie that does this so well and has characters existing in the same dimension, existing in the same plane, that is an achievement that should be given as a check to this. And I think it's, all in all, I think it does it so well, and I think Carter's right. But that's just what I think. I think we've talked this. I think we're going to keep talking in circles on this one.
We'll talk
Yeah, I think it's best to just call it
about
here.
who we think won this week.
Can I go first?
Sure.
Sure.
I'm picking Silence of the Lambs.
I'm shocked.
Yeah, I kind of went in this already set in mind, but I think the movie's just shot so well, and I don't really have anything else to say other than what I said earlier. But it's just so fantastic, and I wanted to go first because I knew it'd be just an easy pick for me.
So I'll go second. I'm also picking Silence of the Lambs. And I meant to bring this up earlier when we were talking about it, but I'll bring it up now why it's my winner, is look at all the other movies that we've got. Take away all of the sound. If you're watching purely the movie with no sound, so it's just the movement of the camera, which one of these maintains the integrity of that movie the most? It's Silence of the Lambs. Like, that movie with no sound is arguably just as tense and terrifying as it is with sound. And I think that shows how effective the cinematography is.
Is that getting rid of like sound design and dialogue,
Yes,
or keeping
100% no sound whatsoever?
No
and you watch it
sound
hit mute and you're watching the whole
whatsoever.
movie.
A silent film.
Yeah.
Interesting?
A silent of
You
the
feel
lambs.
like because
I think definitely of these three.
Of these three,
And
yes.
then when you look at the
Right.
others, I could see your point of that being the case too.
That's interesting, because since just like thinking back to like our talking about like dialogue and everything, and how like such a big part of that movie is the dialogue. I wonder, like, I'm interested to kind of like test that and see like if it would be just as tense without the dialogue, and just having those scenes of just seeing her talking to Hannibal Lecter, being like, okay, he's talking to her, she's talking to him, she doesn't look like she likes what he's saying, but
the shot reverse shot, I think, is what would ruin it for me.
so it would just be interesting to like. No, I totally see what you're saying,
Yeah.
and I agree to an extent, but it's just be interesting to kind of test that.
But yeah. So Silence of the Lambs wins for me this week.
I
Okay.
think that's a good pick.
Robbie?
This week, I gotta pick Roger Rabbit. I know it's contested. I know there's issues. I just...
I'm also shocked.
Okay. Not all of us can be wild cards this week, Cardi.
Yeah.
We just spent, an hour and a half talking about it, I'm sure. Not really. Don't worry, guys. But it's so good. I love it. I'll let Brett make his pick.
I am also going to pick Silence of the Lambs just because it is definitely the most mature and how it just definitely just adds to everything else in that movie, adding to the tension and whatnot, and it's good.
It's good.
It's a good looking movie.
With
I
all
agree.
winners, there must also be a loser. And in this penultimate episode, we're getting ready for the final fight. So what of our
The final fracas.
The final fracas. So what of our films is saying goodbye this week?
That's what we're about to find out. Am I going first?
Yeah.
I'll do it.
Let's just go in the same order.
So I forgot to bring this up, but in prep for this, because I really wanted to get the cinematography and say some really valid opinions on it without just going off of memory, I rewatched Silence of the Lambs, I rewatched Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and while I didn't rewatch all of Robocop, I watched as many clips as I could on YouTube because it's not streaming anywhere and I don't own it, and I was out of town, Brett, so I couldn't borrow your Blu-ray. And I gotta say...
I would have found you.
Yeah, I gotta say...
Hand-delivered it.
I know you would have. Before I was watching them, I thought my answer was there for me. After having rewatched those movies, I can say that it made the gap a lot thinner between Who Framed Roger Rabbit and RoboCop. It was now a lot tougher than I thought it was going to be. However, from the points I made, I gotta say that I'm voting off Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I don't like that I'm voting it off, but when I really get down to what I look at for cinematography, it's got to be things that kind of say things about the movie without saying it, having some sort of mise en scène at work, and it's got to just play on some of the thematic elements of the movie, and because the camera is what makes the movie, there's got to be some artistic choices with that. I think it's super great how much it utilizes it to put animation afterwards in post, but I think when you don't look at that, it's a lot of blank space, and certain shots seem a little uninspired and just kind of there because they know it'll be better later on. And I don't see that with RoboCop, and I don't see that with Silence of the Lambs. So, unfortunately, I got to vote Who Framed Roger Rabbit. For the first time, I'm voting off Who Framed Roger Rabbit. But yeah, that's my pick.
Oh boy.
Carter, spill yours.
So, I was thinking about this, and it's difficult because Brett made a hell of an argument. And putting them... I talked so hard for Who Framed Roger Rabbit for that one fucking scene, but seeing how they looking at it movie to movie, shot for shot, when Brett brought up the fact that they framed the shots in RoboCop in a yin-yang sort of way, that had never even occurred to me. But the more I think about it, I'm there was so much careful planning that actually went into that cheesy 80s action movie. And it's insane because, as we've brought up more than once, Roger Rabbit was nominated for the Oscar. But ultimately, I have to. Ultimately, I gotta give it to Roger Rabbit. I gotta.
Man, it's looking grim. All right, Robbie.
You know what? Last week, after we recorded, I looked at Brett and I said, Brett, I don't have anything against RoboCop. I just don't like it as much as you guys. I gotta vote it off. I think it's static. I think it's flat. I don't like the cinematography in it. I get what Brett talks about for it. It just does not hit me the same way it hits you guys. I don't think it's that great of a movie. It doesn't ever seem to be that much more than a cheesy 80s movie for me. And I gotta vote it off. I've done it 3 weeks in a row. This is my vote for it this week. I know we're either gonna split or I don't think we're gonna split. Brett's not gonna vote for Robocop.
He could.
We'll see.
It depends if he votes with his heart or if he votes with his mind.
So I came into this episode with a very clear idea of what I thought was going to lose and what I thought was going to get voted off, and I was ready to admit to it and vote it off. But coming in here and hearing all the arguments and just this whole episode, just as like Phoenix said, just that whole gap just kept getting thinner and thinner and thinner, and just a lot of the arguments that were made just totally swayed my mind, and I'm just like, am I shaking? Yeah, not really. But I was not expecting to vote this way, but just all the arguments, I am going to vote off Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and just I was ready to vote RoboCop, but just hearing Phoenix talk about everything, and when Carter said, like, if you take away all the sound, just Silence of the Lambs is the only one that kind of lives up to it, and then hearing Phoenix talk about how, like, the other two movies, the camera work really, like, shows you, like, adds to what's going on, adds to the theme, and I, like, if you combine that with taking away all the audio and the sound, it's just all doesn't really, it kind of stacks the deck against Roger Rabbit. And we were talking a lot more about the discussion about, like, scenes versus the movie as a whole, and just a lot of very good arguments were made, and just I was ready to vote with my heart, but now I'm voting with my mind, and my vote goes to Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Damn. The upset.
That is actually
This has been another exciting episode of Film Fracas.
This is the yeah, I feel like
This is the penultimate episode. This is Battle of the
This
Lines.
is the upset of the season.
Of the season, probably.
Oh, man.
So
I'm floored because I think you guys are. I don't know. We talked about it at length for so long.
I definitely did not see this coming. Actually.
We don't have any more time.
I did not know.
This is a shocker to us as well as you listening.
Like,
this is crazy.
Like when I started talking about RoboCop, I was kind of like, yeah, I'm under no illusions about what this movie is, and I was kind of like, that was my way of saying, like, yeah, I know this movie's going to get voted off this episode, but here for the second week in a row, bitch, I'm shook.
Yeah.
We'll get to it next week, but we'll talk about these films holistically.
All right.
Yeah.
We have a final episode of season 1 coming up next week.
So let's give our sign-offs and
Okay.
recommendations.
Yeah, let's do it.
I am Carter Spilliards at CA Spilliards, like spill something in your yard and add an S on Twitter. My recommendation this week is if you have Star's Counterpart on Starz with J.K. Simmons is actually a really great show. It's got this kind of great like spy thriller to it and kind of a sci-fi bend, and I'm really enjoying it.
Cool. You find me on Snapchat. I am Brett Johnson, or JHNSN number 1. I post a movie review as close to every day as I possibly can. Hit a lapse this weekend, but hey, I'll post a review, thumbs up, thumbs down, agree, disagree, send me a message, we'll talk about it. My recommendation this week is the one and only The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension from 1984, starring the one and only Peter Weller. The best way I can describe this movie is if they took the emotion joy and managed to condense it into a movie for 2 hours. That's what it is. It is a sci-fi camp adventure, and oh my god, it's so good. So go watch it and then tell me how much you hate me.
That's such a good connection to RoboCop still. Yeah, and bringing the Peter Wellers thing together. I'm at BombAssPhoenix on Twitter. You can follow me there. My recommendation is, again, another TV show, because I haven't been to the movie theater since South by, unfortunately. But The show I'm recommending.
Like a month.
It's been a while.
Yeah. Recording this right now, it's been like a month, which is unfortunate. But I've just been busy. But for my recommendation, I'm gonna be picking the season 2 of Legion on FX, which for me premieres tomorrow. For you, it's already out. And you should check it out because it is.
You're proactively saying it's going to be good.
Yeah, 100%, man. This is.
Better yet, check out the first season of Legion if you haven't seen it. It's fantastic.
I agree.
Oh,
and
thanks for the recommendation. I will check out the first season of Legion. I still haven't seen it.
I mean, I think it is my favorite TV show on right now. I love it a lot, and I'm so excited for episode 2. In before next episode when I see the first episode and it's not good and I cry or whatever. But I think it'll be good.
I am Robbie_DeShazer on Twitter and Instagram. I post stuff there, mostly just retweeting Film Fracas at this point. My recommendation, I gotta say it, Ready Player One's good. I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun. Don't think too deep about it. It's a movie. It's not a film. But go see it. It's worth your money. Brett disagrees. Whatever. Brett and I are having a lot of disagreements right now.
No, just like how pretentious that kind of sounds. Like, oh, it's not a film, it's a movie.
Yeah, Steven Spielberg said that at South by.
I know.
We were all like,
we
what?
were talking about that before the show, but I was just kind of like, wait, like.
Yeah.
It's a fun, entertaining 2 hours and
it's-
20 minutes. It's worth your money. Go do it.
And I'll say this real quick. For those of you listening, please write us a review on iTunes. That really helps us out.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
follow
Yeah,
us on our social
please.
media accounts.
Yes.
All Film Fracas, right?
Yeah.
across
We're
the
all
board.
At Film Fracas.
Let us know what we could be doing better. Let us know what you like. Let us know what you don't like.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for our season
Yeah.
finale next
Season
week.
1 finale next week.
It'll be
Baby.
exciting. Head
Who
to
knows
head.
what'll happen?
There's definitely an underdog.
goodness.
But we'll see.
It's kind of a David versus Goliath here,
Little
but
bit.
I mean,
But it'll be an interesting conversation nonetheless.
Oh, yeah.
it will for sure.
right.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you guys next week.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Film Fracas. We know there are a lot of shows on the web, and we are so glad you took the time to listen to ours. Thank you to Brett Johnson, Carter Spilliards, and Robbie DeShazer for writing and producing each episode. Please consider giving us a 5-star rating wherever you listen. It really does help get the word out. You can follow the show on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Film Fracas. Once again, thanks for listening, and we can't wait for you to hear our next episode.